Hey guys, before we get started with today's video, I just want to say thank you to Ben's Horrors for narrating this story. Please go check out his channel where I read some stories for him as well. I'll leave a link in the description below. He's a good scary story narrator. So tonight's story is called New Zealand Horror, written by Skeptikiwi and narrated by Ben's Horrors.
I was approximately 4 or 5 years of age and living with my mom and younger brother Seamus in a small 3-bedroom house in Otago, New Zealand. The house was small and run down, thin insulation and made of cheap weatherboard. As the older and somewhat more hyperactive brother, I did not conform to normal sleeping patterns and would quite often wake up at all hours of the night. Of course, I decided that I would need to include my brother Seamus in any shenanigans that I could get up to. But this night was different. Instead of including Seamus in activities, I in fact excluded him in the worst possible way. It was a typically cold South Island night, and there was already frost etched on every glass surface on the outside of the house. New Zealand often gets into the minus degrees, and this night was no exception. I awoke as usual past midnight, and immediately crawled out of bed and opened the bedroom door. Seamus's room was directly across from mine, and I made my way into his room as he slept with the door open. "Seamus," I whispered. "Seamus!" I called louder this time, reaching out to rock his shoulder. Seamus grunted quietly before slowly rolling over to me. "What?" he asked sleepily, yawning as he did so while rubbing his eyes lazily. "You want to go on an adventure?" I said. I'll never forget how quickly his eyes lit up. "Yeah!" He practically jumped out of bed. We snuck down the hall past our mother's room and turned right into the kitchen, where we continued through the back door. "You first," I said, as I opened the door for Seamus. Seamus stepped outside without hesitation. I then slammed the door shut and locked it, covering my mouth to stifle the fit of laughter that was attempting to escape from my throat. The door had no glass that I was able to peer out of, as I was only under 4 foot tall. If I tilted my head upward, I could see a small rectangular pane of grimy, unwashed glass, though it was out of reach to me, however, and so chose to ignore it. I stood there, hand flat against the hard wood, waiting for Seamus to begin pounding on the door at any second. This was a prank that I played on him fairly regularly, and he always reacted in the same manner, which was sheer no-hands-barred panic. But no sound. Nothing. I waited and waited. Still nothing. No knocks. No cries. I carefully retrieved a chair from the dining room table and rammed it up hard against the door, before scrambling up onto it in order to peer through the glass pane. I could see nothing except for our backyard. I got down off the chair and moved it out of the way before turning the large bronze knob of the deadbolt mechanism. I gingerly unlocked the door, opened it slowly to prevent the hinges from squeaking too loud, and peered outside. Nothing. Just darkness and chilled wind. I shut the door and opened it again, hoping that it would help, but it didn't do anything. I closed the door. Confused, I thought he had perhaps caught on to my trick and had ran to the front door of the house. I made my way there swiftly, unlocking it and throwing it open. Once again, just a dark void. My imagination was running wild, and I thought that I could hear the faint cry of my name being repeated on the light breeze. As a 5-year-old, I didn't have any grasp on the seriousness of the situation. I didn't want to wake up my mom at this time of night and explain what had happened, so I went to bed. Seamus was back in his bed in the morning, and nothing was said. He seemed a little odd, though. My mom even picked up on it. He was back to his usual self after a few days, however, and our lives returned to normal. I never pranked him in such a manner ever again. Years later, while we were sharing a bottle of whiskey, I brought the situation up with Seamus and inquired as to what happened to him that night. His face suddenly became stern and pale. "I was hoping you'd forgotten about that," he said under his breath. He took another swing of whiskey and sighed before delving into his side of what happened. Seamus, to this day, has fleeting images of the door shutting and opening rapidly for 2 minutes, with nobody being the cause. He remembers screaming and shouting for help and banging on every house surface and window for a full 15 minutes, always feeling like he was being watched, catching glimpses of tall, dark figures standing near him. The cold was dreadful and had seemed to literally seep into his bones. The silence for him was only ever broken by a sharp wheeze of breath or snarl that seemed to be right next to his ear. I then asked him, "How did you get back into the house?" He looked at me and said, "I fell from the ceiling of our house into our lounge room. It was like a nightmare."
If you liked this video, please go check out the story I did with Ben's Horrors. If you have a scary story, email it to nightmarenarrative@gmail.com. And remember guys, sleep well.